Welcome back to Shabby Shack Studio, friends, as we share Project Gather together. This is a project that I created for my own home, and you get to see some behind the scenes of my studio that you're looking at now, my kitchen, and even me a little bit later. I debut my first time that you'll actually get to see me as we style this project together at the end. So let's start with some basic tools. My Winsor Newton acrylic paints that you've seen me use in previous projects. This little step stool was something I picked up from IKEA. You can see me grabbing a ruler and just marking up some little socks that I decided to do on this. This was 12 centimeters, so just in case you want to do something similar. Some masking tape, you can see I've already taped it, so you can see the idea. And then I'm going to mix up some paints, and these are designed to match some new textiles from my new We Are Australian collection. So this pattern and this textile that you can see in front of you is called Wildflowers. From top to bottom, the colorways are Summer, Red Earth, and Eucalyptus. And I wanted to feature my own work and my own textiles in my own home. It's a bit like the mechanic who never fixes their own car. My home is always last on my list because I'm busy supplying my wholesalers and my beautiful customers. So I thought I would take a step back this beautiful season of giving and gift to myself. So I had this project on the plan for just the longest time. So I finally thought, you know what, it's time to get started. Okay, so this is a bit of a mix of old and new. So I've got the new step stool, the new IKEA step stool, and then I've collected a whole lot of these rolling pins over the years. They're something that I've just always had, and I had them in a beautiful old pottery jar in my new kitchen. So we've been in our new home since May and just doing endless projects. So I've created these little socks for the step stool. I just feel I love the birch and that beautiful soft light timber, but I just thought, you know what, they need a little something. So, and I grabbed my collection of rolling pins that you see there that do get used, and they've been in that pottery jar since we moved in. And then I was inspired with my own textiles, so I am actually mixing up the colors that you see. So the little socks and the first rolling pin are in the eucalyptus. So you will notice that they dry. It dries a bit darker as we go. So you're actually going to see me put a couple of coats on, and it's really, really noticeable how much, especially the eucalyptus, how much darker it dries. Okay, so let's talk tools. The eucalyptus is a mix of the Winsor Newton phthalo green, titanium white, and burnt umber. Okay, so you saw let me mix that together at the beginning, and then I've picked up this little brush, which is a size 4, just in case you're wondering. I would just pick up anything that you have handy. And then this little makeup sponge. So if you do have a daubing brush, by all means use that, but I really love that the makeup brush has a really close kind of sponge, so it picks up the paint really nicely and creates a really nice even finish. So I actually layer the paint on quite heavily, but not right to the edge of the masking tape. And then I use the sponge to carry the paint up so that it doesn't kind of bleed underneath the tape. Okay, then I go back to the rolling pin. I make sure everything's had at least 2 coats here before I take off the masking tape, which is always such a fun thing to do at the end. It's so satisfying seeing how beautiful and clean those lines are. Now don't forget that the trick with doing it is that you don't brush the paint right to the top. You use the brush to do it, and there's just less chance of bleed. So then you get that beautiful, nice, crisp line. So the little socks are on all 4 sides, and it is a little bit tricky to make sure that though the line is straight, so it's level, it's horizontal with the ground. So that's why I used my my ruler at the beginning, and I measured from the floor. So I sat it on a flat surface, it being my table, and then measured on all sides really carefully, put a little pencil mark, and then went and added the masking tape. So that's what I recommend. Okay, so you can see that I'm using my textiles to prop my wet roller on. obviously taking care not to put the paint onto the textile because it still has some drying to do. Now, I'm quite a tidy painter. I don't tend to get the paint everywhere. I tend to, because I guess because I do it a lot. I'm always painting something. If you are a messy painter and you seem to get it everywhere, then I really recommend that you put some papers or a throw sheet or something down. That way you don't cry that you've damaged something that underneath you that you're working on. For me, this is my studio table, so it's a really beautiful vintage piece that extends out, so it's huge. It's over 2 meters long. And as you can see, it truly is a vintage piece. It's a piece that had been totally neglected and then I gave a new life. So the timber isn't perfect. So if I'd got a little bit of paint on it, quite honestly, that would just be character for me. If you have a table, obviously, that is far more special and new and etc., don't forget to put something down and protect your table. Okay, so then now I moved on to my second roller and I mixed this really beautiful kind of rose pink. Now this is going to be closest to my red earth that you can see the second textile down, the second colorway. I did decide to do all four of the pins I had, so you will see me mix the next color into this. For this one, I actually used a combination of the titanium white and a red that I have handy, which is the red medium rouge. Okay, so I use a mix of that for the red earth pin that you can see finished there. And then I picked up a third pin. So this is one I've had for ages and was painted pale pink somewhere along the way. And I'm just painting over that because that paint doesn't have a varnish on it. So to mix the color that you're looking at now, which is more of a terracotta, I actually added just some yellow to it. Okay, so I just added a bit of yellow to the pink I already had mixed. And then if you feel it's a bit too strong, just add in a little bit of your titanium white. Again, I'm going to put all these colors for you below, and I'll link some paints through from the Amazon. That way, wherever you are in the world, you can order those and have them sent to your door if it suits. It's actually one of the most inexpensive ways to order your paints. My local craft store, the pricing is so much higher than Amazon, so absolutely recommend. Okay, so I actually had a lot of this one mixed. This project really was something that was from the heart. I decided that I was going to do a breadboard. So I picked up this old breadboard I had and then just actually did the edges. Okay, now you're actually going to see me do the last pin now, so I'm sorry if I'm skipping back and forth a bit. Hopefully you're following okay. So this is the fourth pin, and I decided I wanted to do this in that beautiful mustard yellow that I've called Summer for this collection. Now this pin was a little bit harder to paint because it did have a bit more of a finish on the white that you can see, even though it was chippy. And I wanted to get the right, just that right yellow. So the first coat does end up being a bit too bright for me. So you will see me adding a bit more of the burnt umber a couple of times, and I actually do about 3 coats on this pin to get the right depth of color I want, letting it dry in between and darken as it goes. So don't feel that this is such a, you have to be so perfect, or you have to stress if the color's not right. Put another layer over it. Who cares? Okay, and if you haven't mixed your paint 100%, so you can see the second layer now me putting on, you can see how much darker that is. But if you haven't mixed it that well and something comes through, when you're dabbing it with your sponge, it mixes the paint through as well. So it's perfectly imperfect. And they just come out so nice in the end. Wait till you see. Okay, and then we actually style this together at the end as well. So you get to see this in my kitchen and with my linens. And I'm really, really so happy with how the colors came out, because as always, I did this just live with you. This was completely on the fly. So I did do it over 2 days because I do go back to that platter and spend a bit more time on that. So stay tuned. Okay, so you're looking at probably the third layer on this rolling pin, and I'm really happy now with the color and the coverage. And here you can see now they're obviously dry. Just the depth of color, and they're such a lovely, just a lovely match with my linens, which makes my heart happy. Okay, so now I've gone back to the platter that I had, or the cutting board that I'd started. So I've done the edge in that really beautiful terracotta pink, and then I decided I wanted to put this line along the top of the board in white. And you can see first I just added the white, and then I thought, you know what, I need a bit more water in there. I need it to be a bit softer, and it's just a little bit too harsh straight out of the tube. So you can see me painting that on quite liberally, and then I'm going to use exactly the same technique with the sponge and blot that and bring it to the edges, so I keep a nice crisp line between the white and that beautiful terracotta pink, and then it just looks so interesting. It's quite funny that this cutting board actually wasn't part of my original kind of intended project, and yet the project became all about the cutting board. Isn't it funny? So anyway, I had this lovely cutting board. I decided to jazz it up and make it part of the kitchen space, because I always have loads of cutting boards to pop things on and save my bench, and I'm always cooking, always. So if I'm not in the studio, that's where you'll find me, rustling up something yummy for my family. And as I love to have a home full of family and friends, I love to celebrate life. There's always so many reasons to give thanks and appreciate just how much we have. So the word gather for me is a favorite. It speaks to me. So anyway, I had this idea as I was painting pins and little socks on my step ladder. This little idea came to me. So I sat down and created this graphic just from a little idea I had in my head, and then I'm just cutting it out here with a combination of scissors and craft knife, as you can see, and then we're going to layer it together. As I've said to you before, and with every project I do, it always comes from something that was completely unplanned. I don't redo or don't do a project beforehand and then show you my best. I do the project with you. So 100% you are in my home, in my studio, in my kitchen with me, and we are doing this together. So you can see me thinking about how I'm going to put this together. It was a random idea, and then I cut this out, and even the colors that I decided to mix were completely created and came together on the fly. It was how I was looking at it and what I felt would work. So I started with this kind of dinosaur egg warped shape that I'd created. Take that down, and I'm going to mix that up, and that is going to be in that same red earth terracotta that I've used on my pins. You will notice that I start with a clean palette and with fresh water between each of the colours. I do actually go and give them a really good wash, because the pigments are so vibrant that it would create an issue otherwise. So my brush, my water, my palette and my sponge have been given a really good flush, a really good clean. If you are worried that it will delay your project, just wrap your brush and your sponge in some paper towel and give it a good squeeze, and it removes the excess water for you. So then you don't have to stop and start. Okay, so I'm mixing this up. This is a color that I'm mixing just with my eye. It doesn't have a recipe as such, so hopefully you can replicate it if that's something you want to do just by watching me. So I just felt it needed to have a little bit of yellow in there, but not, you have to be really careful with yellow that you can really mess up your color and then use a lot of paint to correct it. So I did add the yellow last, and just a little bit at a time until I was happy with the color. So I just added a little bit, I added a bit more burnt umber. It just looked too pinky. And as you can see, I put the first coat on here, and I'm coming back in with the second coat. Once again, you can actually see how much that paint changes colour when it dries. So do keep that in mind when you're mixing it, that it's going to get a bit darker. So again, it's the same technique. I've been quite heavy on the paint through the center, and now I'm using my little makeup sponge to graduate that color and bring it out to the edges to encourage a nice depth of color, but to obviously not have that bleed. I wanted to have a nice crisp edge. Okay, so look at that lovely nice edge, looking good. Now I've left that to dry completely before I'd start thinking about how I want to place the word gather. So I do get my ruler just to kind of think of, and I think of how it's it's level, because it can look straight, and then the minute you paint it, you just know you're going to lift that stencil up and you're going to go, oh, and you're going to be unhappy and you're going to obsess about it. So I just got a little bit more careful and measured that a little bit with the ruler to make sure I was happy before I taped that to keep it still. Now, I won't lie to you, this was the trickiest part. It was the trickiest part to cut out, and it's the trickiest part to do. The good news is you can keep your stencil. So if you do create a stencil that you love, you can keep it for later. So you can wait till the paint all dries on it, sandwich it between something so it doesn't curl up at the edges, and you can pull it back out. Okay, so I cut out the center of the G, the center of the A, and the center of the E while I was cutting out this stencil initially. And this part was fiddly because those little center pieces, I couldn't glue them down. It would have damaged the paint below. But it did mean that I kind of had to hold on to them and be really careful when I lifted my finger up. So I used the sharp edge of that craft knife just to hold it in place when I lifted it and moved it. And then I had to be careful that I didn't paint over in the wrong parts, over the edges of the stencil onto that lovely red earth below. So this bit took a little bit of patience. I do have to admit that the makeup sponge was just inspired when it came to this part, because it had the perfect little kind of sharp points and just the finish on it to make this job easier. Okay, so waited till that dried, lifted that stencil up really carefully, and then I'm going to pick up my craft knife in just a moment, and I'm going to lift the center of the G really carefully, the center of the A and the center of the E off. See, ta-da! To expose obviously the beautiful letter. Now, if you wanted to, you could keep it so that they filled in. It's going to make your life a little bit easier. As you can see, the word still says gather. So you don't necessarily need to have the center of the E, G, and A. In fact, it looks really kind of cool without it. So be kind to yourself. Okay, so now my leaves, I left one of the leaves on. You can see I didn't cut it out. And that's because when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, you know what? I want this little, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, these little leaves, I want it to branch out over the word gather. But obviously I don't want to obscure the word, because otherwise it's not going to make a lot of sense. So I left one of the leaves in place where it sits over the E and R, and then mixed up the eucalyptus, and I'm actually sponging this little botanical with the eucalyptus really, really carefully again, just because this where it's cut out at the stem and things like that, it does want to grab and pick up here and there. So your fingers get a little bit dirtier with this job than I did all the rolling pins, and I did the socks on my step ladder with just about no paint on me. Did this and I had paint all over my nails that I'd just done. So it is water-based. It was easy to get off. Okay, I promise. So if you were using something that wasn't water-based, don't have your nails done first, have them done later. Okay, so here you can see I'm finished, just really, really careful because my fingers are still wet. Peeling that stencil up to show you our cutting board gather. So you can see that one finished there. Now let's style it together. So this is a little bit like, hey, how you going? This is me. So this is my kitchen. So I've hooked that little step ladder on. It does come with that little hinge, that little hanging hook, which is terrific. And I'm styling it with my textiles as well. Now we are getting toward the end, so I just wanted to say before I go that I really appreciate having you here. I've got so many new subscribers lately, which has been just wonderful and I really, really do appreciate your support. It's been such a big thing for me to see the channel really start to take off. So thank you so much, and it means I get to do more of what I love. Okay, so here I am popping those rolling pins in and then giving you a close-up of how it all came together. So I would love to see what you think. Pop it in the comments. I will link everything I can for you below. Some of the pieces are vintage, so some of them I can't, like the pottery, etc. But the pieces that I can, and including my textiles, I'll link them for you below. Thanks so much for being here, guys. See you soon.